Imagine this, you're standing in line at a shop, you get your change back, and without thinking, you drop a small silver coin into your pocket. Later that night, you empty your pockets and it falls onto the table, a simple dime. You almost ignore it. But then you notice the date. 1996. And for some reason, you pause. Because what if that tiny coin, the one most people wouldn't even bother picking up, is actually worth more than 10 cents? Not because it's ancient. Not because it's made of silver. But because of something hidden, something most people never look for. And that's exactly what makes coins like the 1996 dime so fascinating. Because behind something so small, there's history, rarity, mistakes, and sometimes, real value. Let's rewind for a moment. The 1996 dime is part of the Roosevelt dime series, first introduced in 1946 to honor Franklin D. Roosevelt. By 1996, this design had already been in circulation for 50 years, quietly passing through millions of hands every single day. These coins were produced by the United States Mint in massive numbers. Philadelphia struck coins without a mint mark, Denver added a small D, and San Francisco produced special proof coins with an S. And just like most modern coins, the numbers were huge. Hundreds of millions of 1996 dimes were made. Which means one simple truth. Most of them are only worth face value. 10 cents. That's it. And this is where most people stop caring. But here's where things start to change. Because in coin collecting, value doesn't come from how common something is. It comes from what makes it different. And sometimes, what makes it different is a mistake. Now before we go deeper into the 1996 dime, let's clear something up, because there's a lot of confusion online. You might have heard about the famous double-deer error on Abraham Lincoln. That error is real. But it belongs to the 1984 penny, not the 1996 dime. And this is important. Because many people mix these things up, expecting every coin to have some famous error attached to it. This is where things get interesting. The 1996 dime doesn't have a widely known, dramatic error like the double-deer. But that doesn't mean it's worthless. Far from it. Because even without a famous headline error, there are still ways a 1996 dime can be worth more than you think. Let's talk about condition. Because this is one of the biggest factors in value. A typical 1996 dime that's been in circulation for years will show wear, scratches, dull surfaces, faded details. These are extremely common and usually worth exactly 10 cents. But if you find one in uncirculated condition, that's a different story. A coin that looks almost brand new, with strong shine, sharp details, and no visible wear, is called mint state. And depending on how perfect it is, a 1996 dime in high mint state condition could be worth $1 to $5, sometimes more. Now I know what you're thinking. That's not very exciting. But stay with me, because we're just getting started. Because when you reach the highest levels of condition, coins graded MS67 or higher, the value can jump significantly. Some high-grade 1996 dimes have sold for $50, $100, even a few $100s at auction. All because they survived decades without damage. Now think about that. A coin most people ignore. Becoming worth 10, 20, even 50 times its face value? Just because of its condition. But here's where things really start to get exciting. Errors. Because even in modern coins, mistakes still happen. And when they do, collectors pay attention. One of the most noticeable errors is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin isn't properly aligned during minting. The design ends up shifted, leaving part of the coin blank. Some off-center 1996 dimes have sold for $20, $50, even over $100 depending on how dramatic the error is. Most people miss this tiny detail. They think it's just damage. But it's not. It's a mistake from the mint. And that mistake makes it valuable. Another thing to look for is doubling. Look closely at the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 1996. Do you see any shadow-like effect? Any doubling of the letters? If you do, you might have a double die coin. These can be worth $20 to several $100s depending on how clear the doubling is. Then there are die cracks. Thin raised lines that appear because the minting die started to crack over time. Each one is unique. Some collectors actively look for these because no two are exactly the same. There are also clipped planchets, coins with a piece missing from the edge. This happens before the coin is even struck, during the cutting process. And while it might look like damage, it's actually a collectible error. A 1996 dime with a clipped planchet could sell for $10 to $50 or more. Now let's talk about something special. Proof coins. If you ever come across a 1996 dime with an S mint mark and a mirror-like finish, you might have a proof coin. These were made specifically for collectors, not for circulation. And in some cases, especially for 1996, there are silver-proof versions. Yes, silver. Unlike regular dimes made of copper-nickel, these special coins contain real silver. And that alone gives them extra value. Depending on condition, a 1996 silver-proof dime can be worth several dollars to $20 or more. Now imagine finding that in your collection. But let's take a step back for a moment. Because this isn't just about numbers. It's about perspective. Think about how many coins pass through your hands every day. How many do you actually look at? How many do you actually examine? Probably not many. But hidden in that everyday change, there's always a possibility. A small chance that one coin is different. One coin has an error. One coin stands out. And that's what keeps collectors searching. Now here comes the reality check. Because this part matters. Not every 1996 dime is valuable. In fact, most of them are not. And that's okay. Because the goal isn't to believe every coin is worth a fortune. The goal is to understand what makes certain coins special. To know what to look for. And to avoid being misled by exaggerated claims. Because while some coins can be worth more, most will still be worth face value. But that doesn't make them boring. It makes the hunt more exciting. Because when you do find something unusual, it actually means something. Now imagine this. You're sitting at home. You grab a handful of coins. You start checking them one by one. Then you see it. A 1996 dime. At first, it looks normal. But then, you notice something. A small detail. Something slightly off. Maybe the design is shifted. Maybe there's doubling in the letters. You look closer. Your curiosity kicks in. And suddenly, that tiny coin becomes something more. That's the moment. That's what makes this so addictive. Not just the value, but the discovery. So what should you do right now? Simple. Check your coins. Look for 1996 dimes. Examine the mint mark. Look closely at the details. Use good lighting. Take your time. Because most people miss this tiny detail. But now you won't. And that changes everything. Because the next time you see a coin, you won't just see 10 cents. You'll see possibility. And maybe, just maybe, a hidden treasure sitting right in your pocket. And if this made you look at coins differently, stick around, because there are more coins out there with incredible secrets, and your next discovery might already be waiting for you. You're at a checkout counter, the cashier hands you your change, and without even thinking, you drop a small silver coin into your pocket. Later that day, it falls onto your table. Just a dime. Nothing exciting, at least at first glance. But then you notice the date, 2003. And something about it makes you stop for a second. Because what if this tiny coin, the one most people ignore every single day, is actually hiding something you've been walking past your whole life? Something rare, something valuable, something most people will never even think to look for. And that's exactly where this story begins. Because what if this tiny coin, the one most people would never even look at twice, could actually be worth more than 10 cents? Not because it looks special. Not because it's old. But because of what most people miss when they don't look closely enough. And that's where the story of the 2003 dime begins. Let's take a step back. The 2003 dime is part of the Roosevelt dime series, a design that began in 1946 to honor Franklin D. Roosevelt. By 2003, this coin design had already been in circulation for over half a century, quietly passing through millions of hands every single day in the United States. These coins were produced by the United States Mint in enormous quantities. Philadelphia minted coins without a mark, Denver used a D, and San Francisco struck special proof versions marked with an S. And the numbers? Massive. Hundreds of millions of 2003 dimes were made. Which means one simple truth. Most of them are worth exactly what they say they are. 10 cents. Nothing more. And that's why most people never give them a second thought. But here's where things start to shift. Because in the world of coins, value isn't always about rarity in production. It's about rarity in condition, and even more importantly, mistakes. Now before we go deeper into the 2003 dime, there's something important to understand. You may have heard about famous coin errors like the doubled ear penny connected to Abraham Lincoln. That error is real, but it does not belong to the 2003 dime. And this is where a lot of confusion happens online. People assume every coin year has a legendary error attached to it. But the truth is more subtle. And honestly, that makes the search even more interesting. Because instead of relying on one famous mistake, you're looking for small, hidden details that most people overlook. This is where things get interesting. Let's talk about condition first. A 2003 dime that has been circulating for years will usually show wear, scratches, dull surfaces, softened details. These are extremely common. And in that condition, it's still just worth 10 cents. But if you find a 2003 dime that looks almost untouched, bright, sharp, reflective, that's a different category entirely. Collectors call this mint state. And even though it's still a modern coin, condition matters a lot. A high-quality uncirculated 2003 dime might be worth $1 to $5 depending on grade and demand. Now that doesn't sound dramatic. But wait. Because at the very top end of quality, coins graded MS67 or higher, things can get surprising. Some top-grade examples have sold at auction for $50, $100, and occasionally even more. All because they survived circulation without damage. Now think about that for a second. A coin that normally gets ignored, becoming worth 10, 20, even 50 times its face value? Just because it stayed perfect. But condition is only part of the story. Now let's talk about errors. Because this is where collectors really pay attention. One of the most noticeable types of errors is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin blank isn't properly aligned when it's struck. The result? The design shifts to one side, sometimes dramatically. Part of the coin may even be missing from the image. These coins are instantly recognizable once you know what to look for. And depending on how extreme the error is, a 2003 dime like this could sell for $20 to over $100. Most people would think it's just damaged. But collectors know it's a mint mistake, and mistakes can be valuable. Another thing to look for is doubling. Carefully inspect the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 2003. Do you notice any shadow effect? Any slight duplication of letters or numbers? If so, you might be looking at a double die variety. These are caused during the die-making process when the design is imprinted slightly twice at different angles. Some are very subtle. Others are obvious. And depending on clarity, they can be worth anywhere from $20 to several $100s. Then there are die cracks. These show up as raised lines across the coin's surface. They form when the minting die begins to wear out and crack under pressure. Some are small and barely noticeable. Others are dramatic and run across the entire coin. Each one is unique. And collectors often find them fascinating because no two are exactly alike. There are also clipped planchets, coins that appear to have a missing piece from the edge. This happens before the coin is struck, when the metal sheet is improperly cut. It creates a distinctive curved or straight bite out of the coin. And yes, even though it looks like damage, it's actually a recognized mint error. A 2003 dime with a clipped planchet could sell for $10 to $50 or more depending on size and shape. Now let's talk about something special. Proof coins. If you ever find a 2003 dime with an S mint mark and a mirror-like finish, you may be holding a proof coin. These were specially made for collectors, not for circulation. Some 2003 proof dimes were also struck in silver versions. That means instead of standard copper-nickel composition, they contain real silver. And that alone gives them extra value. Depending on condition, silver-proof dimes from this year can sell for several dollars to $20 or more. Now let's step back for a moment. Because this is where perspective matters. Think about how many coins pass through your hands every week. You probably don't even notice most of them. But hidden among them? There's always a possibility. A small chance that one coin is different. One coin has an error. One coin stands out. And that's what keeps collectors searching. Now here comes a reality check. Because this part is important. Not every 2003 dime is valuable. In fact, most of them are not. And that's completely normal. Because billions were made. The goal isn't to assume every coin is rare. The goal is to know what to look for. So you don't miss the ones that actually are. Because once you understand that, you stop seeing coins as just change. You start seeing them as possibilities. Now imagine this. You're sorting through a handful of coins. You spot a 2003 dime. At first, nothing special. But then you look closer. Something feels off. Maybe the strike is slightly shifted. Maybe there's a faint doubling in the lettering. You adjust the lighting. You compare it with another coin. And suddenly, you realize this one might be different. That moment, that discovery, is what collectors live for. Not just value, but recognition. The idea that something ordinary was actually hiding something extraordinary. So what should you do next? Simple. Start checking your coins. Look for 2003 dimes. Examine them carefully under good light. Look at the edges, the lettering, the design alignment. Ask yourself one question. Does anything look unusual? Because most people will never check. Most people will never notice. But now you will. And that changes everything. Because the next time you see a dime, you won't just see 10 cents. You'll see possibility. And maybe, just maybe, a hidden piece of history sitting right in your hand. You're standing at a checkout counter, distracted, thinking about your day. The cashier hands you change, and you don't even look closely. A few coins drop into your hand, a nickel, a couple of pennies, and a dime. You shove them into your pocket without a second thought. Later that night, you empty your pockets onto a table. Keys, receipts, loose change scattering across the surface. One coin rolls slightly before stopping under the light. A dime. Nothing special. But then you notice something, the date. And suddenly, for no clear reason, you pause. Because what if this tiny coin, the one you almost forgot about, is actually something more than just 10 cents? What if it's one of those rare moments where everyday life hides something extraordinary in plain sight? Most people would never think twice. A dime is a dime, right? But in the world of coins, that assumption has surprised a lot of people before. And that's where this story begins. The 2015 dime belongs to a long-running series known as the Roosevelt dime, introduced in 1946 to honor Franklin D. Roosevelt. It's a design you've probably seen thousands of times without ever really looking at it. His profile on the front, the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the back representing liberty, peace, and strength. By 2015, this design had already been in circulation for nearly 70 years, produced steadily by the United States Mint. Millions upon millions of dimes are minted every single year, and 2015 was no exception. Philadelphia struck coins without a mint mark. Denver added a small D. And San Francisco produced special proof versions marked with an S, often made for collectors. And here's the reality that most people never stop to consider. Billions of dimes exist. And most of them are worth exactly 10 cents. That's it. No hidden treasure. No secret jackpot. Just everyday money. Which is exactly why most people ignore them completely. But here's where things get interesting. Because even in modern coins like the 2015 dime, collectors don't just look at age. They look at condition. They look at rarity. And most importantly, they look for mistakes. Now before we dive into the 2015 dime itself, there's something important to clear up, because coin stories online often get mixed together. You might have heard about a famous error called the doubled ear penny connected to Abraham Lincoln. That coin is real. It's legendary in the hobby. But it does not belong to the 2015 dime. And that's important to understand, because modern coins don't always have dramatic, headline-making errors tied to them. Instead, their value comes from smaller, subtler details, the kind most people completely miss. This is where things start to shift. Let's talk about condition first. A 2015 dime that has been circulating for years will usually show light wear. Small scratches, dull surfaces, maybe a slightly faded shine. These coins are extremely common and worth only face value. 10 cents. But every once in a while, something different shows up. A coin that looks like it was never used. Sharp edges. Clean surfaces. Strong luster that reflects light smoothly. That's what collectors call mint state. And even though it's still a modern coin, condition can matter more than you'd expect. A high-grade 2015 dime in mint state condition might sell for a few dollars. Sometimes more if it's graded at a very high level by professional services. Now that doesn't sound dramatic, but stay with me. Because this is where perception starts to change. A coin that is technically still 10 cents, suddenly becomes worth 10, 20, maybe even 50 times more just because it was preserved perfectly. But condition is only the beginning. Because the real excitement in coin collecting always comes from something else. Errors. And yes, even modern coins like the 2015 dime can have them. One of the most noticeable types is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin blank is not properly aligned in the press. Instead of a centered design, part of the image is missing or shifted dramatically to one side. Imagine looking at a dime where Roosevelt's face is partially cut off, or where half the coin looks empty. Most people would assume it's damaged. But collectors see something different. A mint mistake. And depending on how dramatic the error is, a 2015 dime like this could sell for anywhere from $20 to over $100. Sometimes more if the strike is extreme and the coin is in good condition otherwise. Then there's doubling. Not the famous doubled ear variety from older pennies, but modern doubling that can appear in the date, the lettering, or parts of the design. Look closely at the words Liberty or In God We Trust. Look at the numbers in 2015. Do they appear slightly doubled, shadowed, or offset? If so, you might be looking at a double die variety. These are not extremely common, but when found clearly, they can be worth anywhere from $20 to several $100s depending on visibility and demand. And this is where most people miss it. Because you don't need special tools to spot these things. Just attention. Just patience. Just a willingness to look closer than everyone else. There are also die cracks. These appear as raised lines running across the coin's surface. They happen when the metal dies used to strike coins begin to wear down and crack over time. Some are small and barely visible. Others are dramatic, almost like veins across the coin. Each one is unique. And uniqueness is exactly what collectors love. A 2015 dime with a strong die crack might not be worth a fortune, but it can still be worth more than face value to the right collector. Then there are clipped planchets. This is when part of the coin is missing because the metal blank was improperly cut before it was struck. The result looks like someone took a bite out of the edge of the coin. It's strange. It's obvious. And it's collectible. Depending on size and shape, these can sell for $10 to $50 or more. Now let's pause for a moment. Because this is where perspective matters. You might be thinking, if these coins are so common, why would anyone care? And that's exactly the point. They're common. Which means almost everyone ignores them. And in that gap between common and carefully observed, value sometimes appears. Now let's talk briefly about proof coins. If you find a 2015 dime with an S mint mark and a mirror-like surface, you may have a proof coin made for collectors. These are struck with extra care, polished dies, and higher quality finishes. Some even include silver versions, which contain real silver instead of standard copper-nickel composition. These can be worth several dollars or more depending on condition and type. Now here comes the reality check. Because it's important not to misunderstand this world. Most 2015 dimes are not valuable. Most are worth exactly 10 cents. And that's okay. Because the value isn't in every coin. The value is in knowing what to look for when something unusual appears. That's what separates ordinary change from collectible discovery. Now imagine this. You're sitting at home again. You've got a handful of coins in front of you. You spot a 2015 dime. At first, it looks normal. But you slow down. You rotate it under the light. You look closer at the edges. You check the lettering. And suddenly, you notice something slightly off. A shift in the design. A tiny crack. A faint doubling. Nothing obvious at first, but enough to make you pause. And in that moment, the coin changes. Not because the coin changed, but because you look differently. That's the real secret of coin collecting. It's not about luck. It's about attention. Because most people will never notice anything unusual. Most people will never check closely enough. But you might. And that's what makes the difference. So here's what you should do next. Start checking your change. Look at every 2015 dime you come across. Don't rush. Don't assume. Just observe. Because once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. And suddenly, everyday coins don't feel so ordinary anymore. They feel like possibilities. Hidden stories. Tiny chances waiting to be discovered. And maybe, just maybe, the next dime you hold won't just be 10 cents. It'll be the beginning of a discovery you didn't expect.